It takes a great deal of time, skill and hard work to unlock major strategic sites. It can take years, sometimes decades, for large-scale projects to complete. From the point at which a parcel of land is acquired, to the moment residents or businesses move in, there is not a day that goes by without a problem to overcome or an obstacle to navigate. My name is Dan Whelan, Deputy Editor at Place Northwest, and today's podcast is brought to you by Brookbanks. Today, we are going to get under the skin of major projects and better understand the challenges that go into knitting the various pieces together. Joining me are Executive Chairman Paul Boileau and Associate Director Fran Taylor, who will give us an insight into the role Brookbanks plays in dragging these projects through from beginning to end. Today, we are going to take our listeners on a journey. And to do that, we are going to use our imaginations. I want you to picture a 500-acre greenbelt site in Greater Manchester, or Liverpool City region, wherever you like, which has been earmarked for redevelopment. The early stage plans are for 2,000 homes, 500,000 square foot of employment space, a primary school, a local centre, and a new link road connecting to a motorway junction. We will explore how each stage of this project is delivered and when, and learn the do's and don'ts of delivering massive developments. There's a lot to cover, so to break things down into nice, manageable chunks, we're going to split today's podcast into 3 parts. In part 1, we will discuss the early stages of a project, from site acquisition through to planning permission. In part 2, we will talk about the delivery of crucial infrastructure to unlock the site. And in part 3, we will delve into how to approach the main construction phase and look forward at the next 5 years of house building under a Labour government. So, without further ado, let's begin. Okay, Paul, to start us off, set the scene. Tell us what it is that Brookbanks does in terms of these large projects. What's the role that Brookbanks plays?
Well, our key function, I think we like to term it as being the master developer. And Brookbanks is unusual in what we do, in that we're the only consultant master developer in the UK. And our role in that is partnering with development consortiums commonly made up of house builders, funders, commercial property promoters, and working with them to take a project from green or brown field all the way through to completion of the project. So we drive a group of people, of companies, in getting outcomes that everybody decide they want to achieve. And it's been said before that we're the glue that sticks this process together.
So you're there cracking the whip, making sure everyone's doing what they need to be doing so that the client's objectives are obtained ultimately.
Indeed.
Fran, how would you get involved in a project? So let's say a landowner has this 500-acre parcel of land. Where does Brookbanks come in?
I think because we're quite a well-established consultancy in the market now, we actually have a very good base of clients already. So we are often working for the big PLC developers out there. So our name is travelling well in the industry, but we are very keen to be networking. We do a lot of work behind the scenes of actually identifying these sites before they get to outline planning permission. So just reaching out to the client where we need to be and saying, look, we understand the struggles of how you're trying to get planning and how we actually can offer a really good service to them there. So reaching out, understanding where these sites are going to be allocated in the future. Yeah.
So having an eye on those strategic sites and plans coming forward, like Places for Everyone in Greater Manchester, for example, the big strategic plan. So a landowner has a site, they want to redevelop it, they call Brookbanks. What's the first thing that you do?
Well, I think what we need to understand as the first part of the process is what is the desired outcome. Because none of these projects are the same, and the support they need is never the same. And it might be that it's fairly light touch support that's needed because there's an established team and we are providing particular skills. That might be some commercial support, it might be development management support. But that might then range all the way to the other end of the spectrum where the client has relatively small amount of internal skills and they need a full team to come in and deliver the project for them. And ultimately the service that we provide is flexible, not only in what is needed when we start that project, but through the lifespan of the project. So typically these projects start off quite small in terms of their resource, and then that resource will build as the project is enabling, and towards the end of the project it will reduce. And again, that's something that's quite unusual in the way that we structure ourselves, in that we're able to flex those resources across the numerous projects that we run and make sure that the outcomes that are desired are achieved.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's not a one-size-fits-all. It's very much a bespoke approach depending on the client, depending on the project.
Yes.
So one of the big things that you guys do is help secure planning permission, which we know is tricky, especially, if you consider the size of project that I've outlined. It's a major scheme. There's lots of moving parts. How difficult is that process at the moment? We hear a lot about the state of the planning system, resourcing. When it comes to a big project like this, it must be even trickier. So give us a bit of an insight into how you navigate those issues.
Well, look, over the last few years, there's been numerous challenges in securing planning consents, and that's been driven both politically, in that the previous government changed what is called the MPPF and how that works and how we have to secure consents and the hurdles we need to go through, and that has progressively made things more difficult. But moreover, there's a distinct lack of resources in the industry, and most planning authorities have lost an awful lot of staff, and they simply haven't got the people that are able to drive things forward. So we've had to change the way we do things to try and get to where we need to as quickly as we can.
Yeah.
And
how have you done that?
Well, again, it's not one size fits all, but for me, it's about working with these organisations. Historically, planning has been quite adversarial in that there's been one side consenting it, one side trying to get those consents, and there are processes in there that have made it that way. But fundamentally, if organisations haven't got the resources to do it, it's no good just cracking the whip, because it's not going to change things. So you need to look at how you do things with them, and you need to partner with them more, work with them, understand the weaknesses they've got, the challenges they've got, and try to support them in getting to where we want to. Because commonly, like us, they want to get to the end. They want to consent this site. So it's up to us to try and support that process. Yeah. And so it's a change of mindset on how we do things.
Yeah, absolutely. That word you use, adversarial, is very, very important, isn't it? Because you kind of have to flip that and make it a collaborative approach, don't you? And that goes to speaking with the community as well. You've got to bring those people along for the ride, especially when it's a large scheme. You can't just say we're doing this and we're doing it this way. It kind of has to be that two-way conversation. Does that form quite a key part of the early stage of the process, would you say?
Yeah, I think it forms that early stage of the process and all the way through to the end of the development as well. It's not just the very beginning we have to work with these planners. We have to make sure that we're actually fulfilling the needs of the outline planning obligations throughout, the Section 106s, and what we're delivering. So these people have a really, really high involvement throughout the longevity of the site, and that's something I think sometimes is missed. People get the plan permission and then just move on. Whereas actually, if you stand working with these people throughout, or these authorities throughout the entire process, you're going to make your time on site a lot easier. You're going to get the deliveries that you want to be delivering. So I think it's making sure you build that relationship. And it's something that I think we in-house are really good at, is actually getting that initial relationship going and making that a longevity relationship.
So it's not just about the planning authority, it's about our consortium members and the relationships in that consortium. But it is the parish council, the local residents, the various consultees that we have to work with. Again, I think that's where the mindset has changed. Now it's about working with all of these stakeholders in trying to understand what they want out of this.
Yeah. It must still be frustrating at times, though, because you'll never, if someone objects to a project, I'd imagine it's quite difficult to change their mind throughout the process.
Not everyone is always going to be happy. Yeah. And it's finding that middle ground of where you can actually say, we can't deliver this, but we can deliver this, and where can we help out for these local communities? For us, it might be a site that's 200 miles away from us, so we don't actually know how people are going to react to a school being put next door to their house, or a supermarket being there. But actually, because we've had those relationships and we actually listen to what the customers need, but also what the clients need to deliver, I it's a really important point. We just need to find a middle ground and try and fulfill the needs of everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a balancing act, isn't it? And your point about making sure that consultation continues past, it's not just, we've got planning now, let's crack on.
Yeah.
Because like you say, these projects are huge. You're going to be there for years.
Yes.
So it's important to have that relationship, isn't it? So you can kind of manage the process and make it as smooth as possible. In a little while, we're going to move on and talk about infrastructure, which plays a key part in some of these large projects. But I'm curious because the projects that you guys are involved in from a development partner perspective have everything. So they have a lot of homes, they have employment space, so they're creating jobs, have a local centre, so the shops, often a school as well. So you're ticking a lot of boxes. If you go on Place Northwest and look at the comments section, a lot of the comments are, where are the schools, where are the shops, to accompany these homes. You're delivering those. So you're already maybe ahead of other developers perhaps in that space, would you say?
I think so. For me, it's all about creating place and doing that as early as you can in a major development. What we don't want to see is an island of homes being built, many hundreds of homes, and the people who are moving into those new homes have got nowhere to spend their time, nowhere to go to the shops, no school, no open space. And it's all of those things that make a community because they bring people together. So again, it's a change of mindset in actually getting those facilities into our developments as soon as we can, and making a thriving community as quickly as we can.
Okay, let's move on to the second part of our podcast today. So we're going to talk about delivering the infrastructure. Let's assume we have the outline planning and we have the reserve matters planning for the infrastructure. The community's on board, more or less, and you're continuing that conversation with them. So infrastructure, what types of infrastructure typically would you be delivering in these schemes? What's required?
So I think where we come in as development partners, we create the service parcels for the developer to build. So as soon as they get to site, they will have their gas, water, electricity, fibre, drainage, and the surrounding highways built. So they can just crack on and really concentrate on delivering good quality homes. So that for us will consider bringing in our civil engineering team, our HET team, to actually get the technical agreement for the roads, the sewers, and then using our commercial teams then to go out to tenders so we can really support building those road sewers, delivering the services at a really commercially good price for the client. Where I think it's a difficult situation is when developers have different goals. So one developer might want to start at one end of the site, the other developer might want to start on the other end of the site. So working out actually, we've got, say, a pot of 500 grand to start with, deliver this site. But one developer wants this, the other wants that. So being that, almost like glue again, that client relationship management of how are we going to meet the needs of one and two. So we do a lot of business strategy plans and what we call horizon plans, actually. So this is where we should deliver. We're looking at our 106 obligations, our planning conditions, saying this needs to be junction A to the motorway has to be completed by this point. We should be building this by year 1, year 3, year 4. So making sure we've got, again, a long-term view of the infrastructure, not just 6 months, because some of this infrastructure takes 3-4 years to get through technical approval, let alone the 2-3 years it takes to build the roundabout or the motorway junction. So again, it's that really long-term strategic thinking on these large sites. It's not just a simple spine road that's going to be serving 20 houses. It's this spine road is serving 2,500 houses. Yeah. How we're making sure that we're really planning for future planning policy changes. It's like the potentially phasing out of gas boilers. Have we got enough electricity capacity for 6 years' time? It's a really important view. So I think when people think about the infrastructure, they sometimes just think sewers and roads. But actually there's a much wider view of infrastructure is called social infrastructure. That school has to be built by 500 units. You should start thinking about that before you even put a foot in the ground for the foundations of that house. I think that's where we come in, isn't it? It's that client relationship management, and also that long-term view for all clients on site, not just the one client. Yeah,
you've kind of got the global view and making sure everything works.
Yeah,
it sounds like a lot like you're juggling a lot of balls, but it's obviously important to have that large scale plan. I want to come on to the social infrastructure thing in a moment. I'll ask you about that, Paul. But the thing you mentioned about the sort of navigating the relationships with the different developers. So what happens in that situation where one developer wants to do one thing and one wants to do another? How do you manage that and make sure everyone remains friends?
Especially on these large sites, you get a different caliber of developers. You get the ones that are focused on the social side of things. You've got the ones that are focusing on potentially the higher end houses. So everyone's got different needs. And we try and get everyone together around the table in person or over Teams, just to understand what everyone's goals are as early as possible. At the end of the day, they've all got to, a lot of the time, have to put up to the cost of this infrastructure. So understanding and then really relaying actually what are your main goals and drives. Again, kind of like our community engagement, you're not going to make everyone happy straight away, but you can try damn hard as you can to try and make everyone 90% happy.
About putting in a plan that's for the good of the development. Often, not everybody will be
Place
happy
at the end of it
all of the time. Yeah, that's life. We're in a 20-year, 30-year project. Not everything's going to be what everybody wants, but actually, if the vision, the ultimate vision, is being delivered, and the plan that you're putting in place is for that vision, then we find that those individuals in the consortium members actually normally see the bigger picture.
Okay. And I'm just imagining that Zoom call with everyone on and how many little squares there'll be on the screen. It sounds stressful. Paul, tell us a bit about the social infrastructure element, because, you know, a road, as in our fictitious scenario, the new link road connecting the motorway to the new development is hugely important. You know, people need to be able to get there, but the social infrastructure as well is almost equally as important.
I think it is, and you probably gathered that's something that's really important to me on these new projects. And again, it's something that we've developed a lot of skills at over the years, advocating that we get the social infrastructure in early and do it well. And for me, that we've mentioned it is about getting schools in early, local centres, open space, leisure centres. All of those are the things that are needed, and often they're not delivered early, and that's in part not just because there's a lack of intent. It's the planning that needs to go into it and the various agreements that need to be put into place. So again, it's about the strategic thinking that Fran's just talked about, in making sure that we set enough time early on, we put those agreements in place, we understand what we want to achieve and when we want to achieve it, and we bring in the specialist teams that can do it. Because it's a different person who delivers a major highway junction than it is who brings forward a local centre. And so bringing this large team together, controlling this huge matrix of activity that's going on, and bringing it to the point where everything's there on time and we've got that, is what it's all about.
Yeah, it must be very satisfying at the end to have known that, you know, what's in the rear view, and now you've got this end product. On the local centre point, that's vital, isn't it? You know, you mentioned before making sure that people have places to go and, you know, shop and have a coffee and whatever it may be. I'd imagine, Fran, that's one part that community consultation is really important in terms of informing what goes in that local centre, would you say?
At the end of the day, where these people live, we need to know what exactly they want. If it's going to be from having a higher end Sainsbury's or an Aldi, you need to really work out what everyone wants. But at the end of the day, it's also what the client wants to deliver and what we've allocated when we first start with the budgets and cost plans. So again, it's a bit of that juggling of relationships. I think with these local centres, what I've learned is having just a mixture of variety, and actually making sure those local centres are delivered is probably more important than sometimes what exactly is in those communities. So just straight away, by having the shops open when we said we were going to have the shops open, the community's thriving. They're so eager to get onto that. So meeting the timescales is a key element, I think, for us.
I think it's about planning the site well as well, because something we've really tried to do recently is create nodes within developments where we put local centres next to schools, next to a little bit of play space. So you create a node where everybody comes together. You've got mum or dad who takes their child to school in the morning, and there's a coffee shop next door, so they meet and go for a coffee. There might be some employment space next to it as well. So actually good planning of the space, not only about delivery, getting in at the front end, creating that good plan of what it's going to be is also important.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, given where we are with the housing crisis and the need for homes, it would probably be quite easy to just say, right, here's this site, get the homes built. But, you know, to take this kind of considered view and a place-based approach is important, isn't it?
Yes.
Now, these major projects are not without their obstacles, as we mentioned in the introduction. So I'm going to throw a spanner in the works. Well, you're going to tell me what the spanner is, because we know it can be any number of problems. It could be a pandemic. It could be an anchor tenant pulling out. It could be a rogue prime minister announcing a sort of ill-advised mini budget. Paul, give me an idea of what sort of challenges you might face along the way during these major projects.
On these major projects, they're so complex. There's probably never a week goes by that we don't have some sort of difficulty that needs to be resolved. And so there's many examples. I mean, I guess if I look at something that happened a few weeks ago on one of our projects where we've mentioned leisure centres, and we have been putting together a package where a leisure centre would be built, and we'd lined up an operator for that. And as part of that process, the operator was bringing in funding to fit out that leisure centre and operate that leisure centre for a period of time. And of course, the community are looking forward to having that by a certain amount of occupations on the site. And we've got all the way to the end of this process. And then it was actually towards the end of COVID, the operator was re-looking at what their model, how they work and what they can achieve. And we took a call which said, I'm sorry, this just doesn't work for us. And we're right at the back end of the project. Of course, that's we've got some disappointed customers there at that point.
Yeah.
And it's down to us to try and recover that as quickly as we can. And there's no silver bullet to make that happen again within a few weeks. But of course, what we've done there is mobilised our teams. We've gone and scoured the market again quickly. We've worked with the local authority and their specialist teams who deal with leisure centres, and very quickly found an operator again. And then we're going through a process, replanning this, tuning this leisure centre for the operator. And what looked to be an absolute disaster actually turned out in the end, okay, there was a little bit of a delay, but turned out in the end to be a better operator, a better product. So we're quite happy with the outcome, albeit we have problems along the way.
Yeah, bit of stress, but the problem was solved. So there's instances like that, I guess, where there's a big problem that you need to all jump on quickly and solve. And then there's kind of the low-level disruption that we've experienced basically continuously for the last 4 years. If you think about construction inflation and, you know, the planning issues that we mentioned earlier on, how challenging has that been to deal with over the last few years?
I think construction inflation probably is a very topical point, especially a lot of our clients they've got their budget set already, and then all of a sudden they've seen a massive uplift in costs. I think where we come in is we're making sure that to minimise these issues is when we give out tender package, we give out works, we make sure the entirety of the scope is there. If that's from regular site checks to make sure that on the ground everything's right, on paper everything is right. And then again, it's making sure we've got the right personnel in to challenge those questions. So when the contractors come back to us, we're challenging, do you actually need that? Or is that just a nice thing to have? Or also when we're actually building these things or getting technical approvals, planning authority might really want a load of conservation curbs, hundreds of trees up a main spine road because it looks pretty, but long-term effect actually is, can the local authorities maintain all that as well? It's not just we're saving costs for clients and it looks pretty for the local communities. It's actually what is best for that community is paying a really, really high management fee just for loads of really fancy landscaping, bushes, plants, rather than just having actually quite a more sensible, like moderate landscaping plan. Actually, that's better for the local community as well. So again, it's just that constant challenging. It's not just challenging finances, it's challenging what we're getting approvals for. I think there's probably quite a big one just to mitigate construction inflation and just general expectation for everyone.
Fantastic. So we've got the infrastructure in, the road is in, the leisure centre is sorted. Despite that problem that we had, we've overcome that. Now it's time to crack on with delivering the homes, which obviously is a very important element of this. of this project. And just before we get onto that, obviously we're doing a fictitious project today, but there are real projects that you guys are working on, and one of them is in Devon, Sherford Newtown. And just to give you an idea of the scale, the listeners, the idea of the scale. So this is a 1,200 acre site, 5,500 new homes. I think that's 800,000 square meters of employment and retail space, 3 primary schools, a business park, a health centre, a local centre, sports centre, town hall, youth centre, library, community park, and a total development value of 1.5 billion. It makes my fictitious scheme look like a village, doesn't it? So we've got all the infrastructure in. We're cracking on now. We're building. And Fran, I want you to tell me a little bit more about managing those relationships, because you've got various developers involved, because not one developer can do it on their own. And they, as you mentioned before, they may have different goals, different models of working. How do you manage that relationship to ensure that they can deliver at speed?
I think it's, as well as the whole strategic planning that we've mentioned before, it's constant communication. It's making sure that even just the little updates we're responding to clients. We're not just communicating with clients, we're communicating with the local community, whether that be from a post on their website or just having monthly updates. It's that level of communication that actually helps speed up the process. I think actually we live in a modern world actually where it's very easy to think that you're communicating properly, but actually by just sending out a brief note every month to the client, to the local community, makes a big difference, making sure that everyone is in line with their strategic goals, whether that's from the build process. One developer knows that this parcel is definitely going to be ready here. These are the obstacles that we need to meet so we can get to saying your parcel is free. But actually, yeah, that communication I think is one of the biggest things that a lot of people forget that you need on these major sites, because there is a lot of moving factors. But where we come in, you've got one person as that one point of contact, but behind that one point of contact there's lots of webs of specialist knowledge, specialist skills, and we bring that together to help these developers build these big sites, really.
Yes.
And how do you mitigate against the disruption during the construction phase to the local community, you know, wagons on roads and all of that, you know, fun stuff? Is that sort of part of the plan as well?
Yes, so obviously we have our construction management plans in place, which have been approved by the planning authorities. So people are aware of this. But again, people live on these sites during build. So for Sherford, for instance, someone could have been living there for the last 10 years. And when we're already halfway through, probably not just that. So that one person is going to be living on technically a building site. So I don't know if you want to jump in here, Paul, of how we mitigate.
I think there's things we can do. Fran's mentioned that the construction environmental plans, they're put in place early. They put rigorous controls in place to make sure that we are protecting local communities from disruptive traffic, from dust, from noise, all these sorts of things that upset people. Within the site, it's a different sort of things that you need to look at. And what we may do, for example, is bring a haul road in from a different direction to keep construction traffic away from the main areas where people are living. What we always want to do is to finish an area and then move out of that area as quickly as we can so people can get on with living their lives. So again, gone of the old days where the roads wouldn't be finished, there'd be footpaths that are open, boxes that are open. We want to get everything finished and get out of there. And at a big site, it's just completely unfair to expect our occupiers to live on a building site for 20 years. So we have to bring in place measures to control that.
I think as well, you're saying the local community want their roads and sewers finished, but having worked for a house builder myself previously, having these old historic assets is such a financial burden for them. By expediting the process of the adoption of the roads and the sewers is such a big win. You're not going to have bond overruns. You're not going to have that liability if something happens to the roads and sewers. So again, as Paul says, making sure that we've got a plan of action so that this area can be adopted. That area is a community that is finished. It's not a building site for 10 years. It's not just beneficial to the local community. It's beneficial for the house builder that originally built that area as well.
It's interesting as well. You mentioned the length of time that you've been on Sherford Newtown, and that it's not even halfway done. There'll be an outline consent, but the world moves on, doesn't it? And markets change, and resident demands change. So how do you go about making sure that original plan remains relevant as you go through the process?
Well, the fact is, often it doesn't. It's not. because things do fundamentally change, and it might be that the nature of employment changes. At the moment, there's been high demand for distribution buildings, and post-COVID, occupiers have much higher demands for the likes of Amazon and other home delivery, and this has driven a different profile of employment. And these sites need to be flexible to those changing needs. And often what we'll need to do is go back and review that outline consent, and the fundamentals will probably stay the same. And it might be that, you take Sherford for the example, there's 5,500 homes, and that will stay the same. But it might be that the nature of those homes need to change because demographics change. There's more single parent families, for example, or my early example, it's the employment changes. So we'll take it through a review process every so many years to say, are we still relevant, and what needs to change? And then it might be that we have to reconsent it or change those consents.
So you work on these projects for a long time. Is it a sad day once you finish your involvement, or are you just happy to sort of see the back of a project that you've been working on for decades?
Yeah, I think it becomes part of you, these projects. I mean, you mentioned Sherford. I was in the team that started Sherford for our business back in 2015, and you know, the old saying, if you break my bones, it's probably got Sherford written into it. It means an awful lot to me, that project. And it is a sad day, but actually there is a huge amount of pride when you finally have completed it, and you go around the development and look at what's been achieved, and you look at people enjoying it, people enjoying their homes, schools open, you see the children there enjoying themselves, and all these other facilities. It's fantastic. And of course, Brookbanks, we've got 20 or 30 of these sorts of projects running at any time. So you're always looking forward to the next one and the next challenge and bringing that on. So yeah, it's we look forward.
So we're recording this at a very sort of poignant time, really, because at time of recording, we're less than 2 weeks into a new era in terms of governance in the UK. We have a new Labour government, pretty strong mandate, and they've made some positive noises around housing and development in general. Fran, what are your sort of thoughts and hopes for the future under this new government?
So I think it's quite an exciting time that we're living at the moment, with Labour pledging to put 1.5 million houses in the next 5 years. I think we're going to see the speed of build really, really exaggerate over the next couple of years. And I think that's where we're going to come in. Again, they're going to be wanting infrastructure built much, much quicker now. Yeah, so I think we're going to need infrastructure for our clients to be delivered a lot more quickly. And I think as we come in, that's going to be a bit of a strategic change in terms of where we have been at the moment, which has been a bit slower. Not slow, I'd say. We've still been delivering at a very reasonable and consistent rate. But I think obviously with these now new policies coming in, our clients are going to be saying, hurry up with these technical approvals. We want this yesterday.
Yeah, want to build houses.
Yes.
Yeah. Are the shackles off?
I think they are. It's early signs that house builders are looking to the next phase. There's a lot of expectations on the new government with the things that they're proposing to change. So certainly we're seeing the heat being turned up. More requests for new project support in the last few weeks. And on existing projects, greater expectations for delivery.
Thank you so much for joining us on this podcast. Hopefully, your predictions are right, and the next 5 years do bring about the sort of the change we're hoping for, and those 1.5 million homes we'll be watching very closely. And I'm sure you guys will play a key role in that. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
I hope you've enjoyed listening. To learn more about Brookbanks, its projects, and the services it provides, go to brookbanks.com. And for all the latest property news from across the region, subscribe to Place Northwest.